Well, to discuss further, let's bring in Professor Paul Spiegel, Director of the Johns Hopkins Centre for Humanitarian Health. Thank you so much, Professor, for being with us on the programme. Firstly, tell us, if you could, what exactly is the agency's annual budget and where has this funding been going to exactly?
Sure. Thank you for having me. The annual budget, as your correspondent said, is about $40 billion. While that's an enormous amount of money, as it's less than 1% of the overall federal budget, it varies. It goes to approximately 130 countries, and it goes towards health, towards education, towards governance, and it supports many governments, including Ukraine, for example, as well as humanitarian assistance across the world.
And what is going to happen to the NGOs that have been relying on this funding? Are they going to be able to survive without it?
Without the funding, many NGOs either will not survive or they're going to have to dramatically reduce what they're doing. You know, this is not in a vacuum. So at the first day in office, the administration said they were going to stop funding WHO, the World Health Organization, and then they have put a 90-day stop on all foreign assistance, with now some exceptions. And so already we're seeing a huge amount of fallout. Well, of course, it's very important to think about the NGOs and UN agencies that are going to be severely affected by this. We really need to focus on the affected populations, and there are so many people around the world that already likely have died because of this, the 90-day stop, because of something as simple as anti-malarial medications, to some of the longer-term issues in terms of humanitarian assistance in places like Sudan, Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, etc.
And is there any way to replace this funding?
No, there is really no government. This is, USAID is a government-funded agency. The only other, so it's by far, the U.S. government is by far the largest donor overall in terms of foreign assistance. And in the past, when the US government has had shortfalls, or when the Trump administration previously stopped funding certain UN agencies or NGOs, other high-income countries, particularly in Europe, tried to provide funding to address the shortfall. But that's not going to happen right now for a variety of reasons. It's just far too much money, and we're seeing similar concerning issues in Europe as well, in terms of populism, anti-refugee, anti-migration sentiment, and reductions in foreign assistance within Europe as well.
And as our correspondent was saying, this could all very well end up in the courts. Is what's happening even legal? The agency was created and funded by Congress. So can an agency, a federal agency like this, be unilaterally closed, as seems to be happening?
Well, number one is I'm a physician professor, not a legal, so I'm not going to answer that. My understanding is that certainly this will be challenged in the courts. But there are a lot of questions still that remain. For example, many other countries, including the UK and Canada, have moved their humanitarian and development assistance arms under the equivalent of their foreign affairs, or in this case, State Department. So that has been happening over time. The big question I think that we all have is, will USAID still exist? Clearly, well, it may not exist in its current form. Will it move under the State Department? What level of funding will be available? And because this government, as frankly all other governments, use foreign assistance to promote their foreign policy, and given that this administration has said very clearly that all funding must be in America's best interest, the question is, how will they interpret that, and what will that mean for the many countries around the world where life and death are dependent upon this aid?
And also, the agency was initially set up to counter Soviet influence, among other reasons. You say China and Russia may step in to fill the gap here.
Yes, so there are a lot of different reasons why foreign aid is so important. Of course, it does promote government policies, but there's a mixture of hard and soft power. And America, by being the largest donor of foreign assistance, the soft power has been very, very important over the years to America's benefit by either abolishing or reducing or making this completely subservient to certain aspects of government policy. It's going to clearly have a vacuum. And some countries, I mean, I don't think that Russia is going to be in a position financially to be able to to be able to take over what the US is doing. But in theory, China could consider to at least ramp up, and they're going to benefit at America's expense in terms of their power and influence around the world.
And Professor, you've also said that the impact for the agency could be felt for decades. If it does close, is it possible that it will never be reopened?
Hard to know. I mean, firstly, it may be administrative dependent. So let's see what happens. It's hard to know, but certainly once you close an agency, it can be very difficult to reestablish an agency. And in terms of the effects of decades, the USAID provides immediate life-saving humanitarian assistance, but it goes across the gambit, including for research, including many American universities that are, for example, working on malaria vaccines, working on different types of research that can have positive, cost-effective solutions that will save hundreds of thousands, millions of lives in the future. But if that funding is cut as well, it's going to have both immediate and then longer-term, very negative effects.
And this also has an impact on the thousands of people who work for the agency as well. You point out many of them have already made a lot of sacrifices.
Yes, yes. I mean, again, we care most about those who are, vulnerable and affected across the globe. But this will have a very, very large knock-on effect, both of U.S. government employees, but USAID has tens of thousands of contractors, private sector that rely on funding from USAID. So we're talking $40 billion. This is a lot of money, excuse me, and it will have a very a negative effect both on those that have spent years. Likely they could have gone to the private sector and make much more money, but they spent years working within the U.S. government to try to help people's lives. They will be negatively affected. NGOs, UN agencies, and even the private sector will be negatively affected.
And the agency, it might have been bracing for a move of this kind, judging by what was being said by the Trump administration, but perhaps not at the speed that it's come into force. Were you surprised to see staff being told to stay away from the building? It's shuttering overnight, essentially, over the weekend also.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where perhaps nothing is surprising anymore. However, I agree that everything is moving so quickly, and obviously the courts and others are not able to react in a very quick manner because there are so many executive orders coming across the board. The idea of shuttering the agency we haven't discussed, but the website now is no longer available. A much smaller version, a very limited amount of projects are now on the State Department's website. Marco Rubio says he's now the acting, the Secretary of State says he's now the acting director of USAID. So the speed with which this is happening and the unpredictability is very problematic.
Professor, we'll have to leave it there for now. We do really appreciate you speaking with us on the programme, though. That's Professor Paul Spiegel, Director of the Johns Hopkins Centre for Humanitarian Health. Thank you so much. Well, that's it from us for now. Do stay with us, though. We'll be back shortly with more world news.